Chapter 13. Eclipse's Renewal Reviving the Heartwood. We appeared inside a makeshift home that looked like it hasn't been used in over a century. Miasma immediately shuffled around and began getting the fire ready in the center of the room. I watched him go directly to each place, with no hint of confusion. "This used to be your old home, right, Miasma?" Miasma paused slightly and turned to glance at me out the corner of his eye. "That is correct, boy. My life was to look after a special tree. Its job was to keep the life in this realm ticking. After I reached godhood, I had to leave this tree. But your task is to bring it back to life." I nodded. "If you can tell me what I'm looking for, I can start right away." Miasma nodded to himself. "I know you can, my king, but the ingredient I need is very dangerous. It's a disease that can consume and extinguish life in seconds. I managed to seal it away when I left here. But now you must consume that disease and use it to revive this tree. There is a wood I sealed away a long time ago. I will take you to it, but the rest is up to you." I saw the nearly dead tree with its withered leaves almost ready to fall at any second. I followed Miasma and he pointed a quivering finger to a darkened forest at the other end of the cavern. Normally you hear the sound of wildlife, but here, there was only silence. Everything was truly silent. I approached a random tree and put my fist through it and felt the disease trickling out and began to burrow into my skin. I went to all the trees and drained them off the deadly disease and began to walk back the way I came. I turned back when I felt more of the disease further in. I darted through the trees and came to a huge tree in the middle of a clearing. I could see that this tree was only half petrified. I could smell the disease seeping from the tree in slow intervals. I placed my hands on the tree and began to absorb the remaining disease when I heard the rustle amongst the outer trees. I glanced back and saw shadows flitter quickly amongst the trees and canopies, and the scent on the air grew thick with dread and death. The leaves parted as creatures of the darkness approached slowly. As they emerged, I could only see the faint outline of them. They blended with the shadows as they entered the patches where the light of the moon didn't reach. Their talons glinted as they spread their hands. The darkness seemed to bend around me and shattered, throwing shards of darkness everywhere, destroying everything they touched in seconds. I glanced at the creatures and snapped my fingers and summoned a fireball in my hand. The shadow stalkers screamed in pain as they burned under the light. But I saw that the tree was beginning to crack and was slowly expanding out. I extinguished the fire and heard the tree deflate back to its original size. I cursed under my breath as the creatures advanced again, quicker this time. I drew my battle axe turned scythe and cut through the creatures with ease, only to realize I wasn't actually cutting them. I felt their claws rake across my back, and they tore open my flesh without trying. I leaped towards the trees away from the big one and let my power out. I fried the shadow stalkers in seconds and realized my mistake when the tree began to creak outwards and the tree exploded. I leaped forward and absorbed the cloud of disease and fell to the floor, clutching my chest and wheezing. Two shimmering lights appeared before me and placed their hands on my forehead, and a light voice reached my ears. "Thank you for freeing our forest of that dangerous disease and for eliminating the creatures guarding the disease. You are nice for one of those gods." Another voice just grunted and hoisted me up and began to head off in the direction of the cavern. They placed me outside the cave and faded back into the darkness of the trees. Seconds later I heard the shuffle of Miasma, and I heard him say, "Goodness, back already and sleeping. You must have been busy." I groaned in pain and Miasma helped me sit up. Then placed the tree in front of me. "Now use the disease to heal the tree." I tried to focus through my hazy vision, and I placed a finger to one of the leaves and poured a small amount of the disease into it, and slowly the tree began to unwilt. I did this to the whole tree until I was completely free of the disease and the tree was rejuvenated. Miasma looked at me and placed the tree back in its rightful spot. Miasma finally spoke. "Did something happen when you were out there? I can feel two variants of the disease." I turned my head to him, and I said, "I was attacked out there by creatures of darkness. They wanted to keep the disease within the tree in the clearing. The tree was only half petrified, and it had been seeping from the tree. So, I began to work on it. When these shadow stalkers attacked me, I burnt them, but I forgot that magic and this disease don't mix. The tree was filled with that much disease that it exploded when I unleashed my power. So, I absorbed the disease. These guardians helped me back. A female and a male. Miasma nodded. You met the guardians? That's surprising. They refuse to see anyone. And yes, that is the Shadow Stalker's job. They are there to preserve the disease. Miasma turned his fingers, and I could feel the disease inside me leaving me. He condensed it and turned it into a ring which he placed into my hand. The ring is for more advanced disease spellcraft and... The cape is also yours, my boy. You have performed your duties to the T. Miasma brandished the cape and fastened it to my robe. He opened the portal to home, but it fizzled out. I turned on my heel and came face to face with two lieutenants. One was an evil-looking shadow stalker, and the other was the one who cut out the portal. I sprang forward towards the other one, but it vanished and appeared behind Miasma. Miasma smiled at me and shook his head. His eyes fell to the table at the back and nodded quickly before his head was torn from his body with a wet squelch. I watched in horror as the god's eyes went dim instantly. I fell to my knee as a strangled cry rose in my throat. Something snapped in me as I watched the demon begin to devour Miasma. Its eyes remained locked on mine as it did this, grinning the whole time. I took a step forward and felt the power of all the artifacts harmonize with each other. A blinding light cocooned around me, dissolving both demons in its holy light. The cocoon shattered into a million tiny shards that glittered in the burning aura surrounding me. I levitated over to Miasma and placed his head back on and picked him up. I opened the portal to go back home when I felt the presence of the guardians. I turned around and the guardians shrank back slightly, but stayed nonetheless. The queen approached me and held her hand over Miasma and indicated for me to place him down. The queen glanced at the other guardians and silently called them over. They sat in a circle around Miasma's body and emitted a strange light. It enveloped Miasma and entered his body. A few minutes went by, and he slowly sat up, blinking several times. He placed his hand over his throat and stared me deep into the eye. When he noticed my appearance, his face lit up. He then registered who was beside him and he fell face first into the dirt. Your Highness, it is a pleasure to finally meet you. The queen stared at Miasma and materialized behind me and peered out from behind my leg. I placed a gentle hand on her head and bent down and gave her a hug. Thank you for bringing him back, my lady. The queen smiled and replied, we will help you in your battle. We have many warriors who will help if I ask them to. You will see us there. I grabbed Miasma by the scruff of the neck and floated through the portal. The portal closed behind us and I placed Miasma on the floor. I shadow stepped into the throne room before all the gods and my friends. The gods stared in amazement and clapped. Gabriel smiled and nodded to me. It looks like you have all the artifacts, my boy. Soon we will be ready to take it to the tyrant. I think it's about time to gather all our fighters and get ready to march by sundown. I placed a hand on Gabriel's shoulder and said, no, he can fight us here. I'm sure we can handle it. The castle can be fortified. I'm going to call the army here. I shadow stepped to the front of the palace and opened the portal to every realm and called all of my armies. The fallen angels and demons lined up in front of me. The hulking demons from the Chaos Realm, Shadow Stalkers, and Guardians stood side by side for the first time in centuries. Angels and archangels were flying high in the air. Molten metal golems and earth golems stood with the arms accompanied by their leaders. The gods joined me at the palace entrance and whistled in unison at the great army before us. Angel and Ursula stood next to us and I waved them back inside. I kissed Angel goodbye and pulled the doors closed behind them. I felt the familiar boiling blood, but it didn't affect me as it used to. Ammon's voice emanated from everywhere. I see you have been busy in my absence, child. I always knew you would grow up troublesome. But your comrades will not survive. I will kill all of them and force you to watch. Your girlfriend especially.